Good evening, welcome to the ITV News in London. Tonight, the woman appointed to lead the Met, Cressida Dick, makes history. We look at her plans and her past. Plus,
There doesn't seem any flexibility at all except on your side.
Deliveroo forced to defend how it treats its riders.
And I am live from the Brit Awards at the O2 Arena. Remember the hashtag last year, Brits So White? Well, that's all changed.
Cressida Dick has become the first female commissioner of the Met. The post is the most senior in British policing. Sadiq Khan said it was an historic day for London. She'll return to the force from the Foreign Office, where she's been working for the past 2 years. She first joined the Met in the 1980s, rising through the ranks, but her conduct was scrutinised when she was in charge of the operation that led to the fatal shooting of an innocent man, Jean-Charles de Menezes, 2 weeks after the terror attacks in London. A jury cleared her of any blame in his death. Now her new chapter with the force is set to begin. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
New police headquarters, new commissioner. Today, Cressida Dick was flanked by her political masters, the Mayor and Home Secretary, just hours after they hired her to be London's first woman police chief. For the last 2 years, she's been out of uniform, working in a senior role at the Foreign Office.
I could not be more pleased to be appointed as the Commissioner. It's beyond my wildest dreams, an extraordinary privilege. I am very humbled. I adore London. I think it's the world's greatest global city. And I love policing and I love the Met.
This is Jean-Charles de Menezes. His face has haunted but not halted Cressida Dick's career. He was the innocent man shot dead by armed police. The Brazilian had just boarded a tube train at Stockwell in July 2005 when officers mistook him for a failed suicide bomber and opened fire. Commander Dick was in charge of the operation.
My heart goes out to the family of Jean-Charles de Menezes. His death was the consequence of a tragic incident. There's been a trial. A jury found that Cressida Dick had not done anything wrong. The crucial thing is that we've got the best candidate leading the Met Police Service forward.
Earlier in her career, Cressida Dick took over the troubled investigation into the racist murder of the teenager Stephen Lawrence. She would later acknowledge the Met's shortcomings over stop and search.
It has historically been an issue which has caused a great deal of angst in some communities.
The debate over stop and search is as relevant today as it was then. These flowers outside a school at Kensal Rise in northwest London are in memory of a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed to death last month. He was the second teenage boy to die violently in London this year, the second in the space of just 4 days. It's a deadly trend with a disturbing familiarity which is blighting some communities. In 2016, there were 12 fatal stabbings, an average rate of 1 a month. Finding an answer to a problem which eluded her predecessors is one of many challenges facing Commissioner Dick. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Well, let's get some reaction to today's appointment. I'm joined by Baroness Jones, former member of the Metropolitan Police Authority, and by Tony Long, a former Met firearms officer who shot dead 3 men in the line of duty. Thank you so much both for coming in. Baroness Jones, if I can start with you. You've held many a Met Commissioner to account in your time with the Police Authority. What do you make of this appointment, the appointment of the first female Met Commissioner?
It's wonderful that we have a female commissioner, no doubt about it. It's time after 188 years of the Met. But at the same time, this is an incredibly controversial choice. Cressida Dick has made history more than once, and particularly, of course, being involved, being in charge of the operation that killed an innocent man. I mean, that is a terrible, terrible mistake for any police force to make.
She was cleared by a jury for any blame over his death. Does that make a difference when you've got the family saying there won't be public confidence in her?
I think that people never really felt that anybody was held to blame properly for the death of somebody who was totally innocent of anything. And so it's going to be very difficult, I think, for not only the family, but many, many Londoners to forget that she was involved in that in any way.
Tony Long, do you think, especially given your background, your history, your experiences with the Met, that people will have public confidence in this appointment despite that shooting?
Well, I think, you know, as you said, she was vindicated by the inquest and all the investigations into it. And I think people have just got to give her time. I think those that have appointed her, I mean, as Baroness quite rightly said, I mean, she was probably the most controversial of all the candidates. And yet, despite that, they've chosen her. So there has to be a good reason why they've done that. And I think it's, you know, I agree, it's good that a female officer has been given that post.
Jenny, there was a sharp intake of breath there at that point of her being the most controversial candidate.
Well, she definitely has been the most controversial. There's also the fact that the Met Police is facing a lot of problems ahead in terms of budget cuts, community cohesion, the deaths of so many young people, and it'll be absolutely fascinating to watch and see if she can cope with it.
You have seen her in action. You've worked with her closely over the years when you were at the Met. What is she like to work for? What is she like as a leader?
And in fact, I mean, she was probably in charge of with the rank that she held. She was probably in charge of many of the operations that I was involved in. But being at the coalface, I probably wouldn't have known that. So, for instance, you know, in the John Charles de Menezes incident, I was actually suspended at the time, but I would have been out on the ground, and she would have been in a control room at Scotland Yard. What I do know is speaking to colleagues that knew her in her rise through the ranks, that everyone I know speaks extremely highly of her and says that she was extremely competent, and everyone had a great deal of faith in her at all ranks, you know, from inspector upwards. What I can say is my only sort of personal interaction with her was, I think she held the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Special Operations in 2014 or thereabouts, when a decision was made to prosecute me for murder. And clearly, once I'd been charged with murder, it was very difficult for my former employer to overtly support me. But she certainly gave, you know, said that, you know, met me personally and said that I would be treated as if I was still a serving member of the police force, having served 33 years. And I know that she sort of gave authority for senior management that were more directly involved with my career path to actually support me through the trial. So, you know,
interesting insight.
A lot of time for her.
She's got the big job now. We'll have to wait and see
Absolutely.
how she handles that and what her priorities are. Tony Long, Baroness Jones, thank you very much for coming in to talk about this. Thank you. A man who punched a banker to the ground in an unprovoked attack has been cleared of his murder. Trevor Taemin hit Oliver Dearlove in Blackheath last August. Mr Dearlove died from his injuries. Taemin admitted manslaughter, but a jury decided he wasn't guilty of murder. Our senior correspondent, Ronke Phillips, has more details.
It was the verdict the banker's mother Joy and stepfather Jeff didn't want to hear. Filmed arriving at the Old Bailey this morning, they left along with the victim's girlfriend Claire without commenting. As the jury found the defendant, Trevor Taemin, not guilty of murder, the family were visibly disappointed. The jobless plasterer had admitted manslaughter but denied murder. The attack, which the prosecution described as unprovoked and senseless, happened outside this wine bar in Blackheath last August. Oliver Dearlove was knocked unconscious with one punch to his head. He died 24 hours later in hospital. Taemin, who's mixed race, told the jury he'd lashed out after one of Mr Dearlove's friends made a racist comment. Giving evidence, he admitted telling the victim, "If you don't get out of my face, I'll knock you out," but said it was just a figure of speech. Tonight, Oliver Dearlove's family said the brutal and unnecessary killing had left a gaping hole in their lives, and they are now faced with what feels like a life sentence without him. Ronke Phillips, ITV News.
The makers of Hotpoint and Indesit tumble dryers are now telling owners of machines with a known fault to unplug them because of a serious fire risk. An Indesit dryer was responsible for a fire which tore through this block of flats in Shepherd's Bush last August. Whirlpool, who own the brands, had previously been telling customers it was fine to keep using the affected machines while waiting for an engineer. They have now changed their safety advice after complaints from Trading Standards and the London Fire Brigade.
We're really pleased that Whirlpool have changed their advice and telling their customers to unplug and not to use their appliances until they've been fixed. For us, there's been a lot of campaigning for us over the last 6 months. Nationally, the Chief Fire Officers Association have been behind it and several other partners as well. So we're really glad they've done the right thing.
And there will be reaction to that development on the ITV Evening News at 6:30. Workers on the Central and Waterloo and City lines have been on strike today in a dispute over 8 tube drivers. The RMT and ASLEF unions called the strike because London Underground wants to transfer the drivers from their home depot in Leytonstone to other depots. But Transport for London said there was a clause in the drivers' contracts which meant they were allowed to move them.
This is 8 train operators being moved from where we don't have enough work for them to where we need them to provide a better service to our customer. It's perfectly normal, it's within our agreements, and we're just trying to implement that.
These people that live in Essex and then come into the East London depots right over to West London. It can't be done. The company are breaking all of our agreements, and we have major concerns that this is something that if they get kind of away with on this, there'll be every other London Underground driver affected in the future.
Deliveroo was one of 4 companies that came under pressure from MPs today over the employment status of its riders. The company insists it doesn't have to offer employment rights because its contractors are self-employed. Last night we showed you the results of our filming when we went undercover at Deliveroo to test the fairness of that system. Today, MPs on the Work and Pension Select Committee had some tough questions for the company's boss. Rags Martell was watching.
I'm Daniel Warne, I'm the Managing Director for Deliveroo.
They're big technology companies that make millions.
And Andrew Byrne, Head of Public Policy for Uber.
But the way they operate and treat their workers is being questioned by Parliament.
We offer well-paid, flexible work that deliver food from restaurants to customers at home. And we adopt a highly flexible model for those riders, which is the reason why we self-employ them.
Deliveroo and Uber have thousands of people working for them, a new workforce in the so-called gig economy. But as we found in our special report last night, many of them don't get any workers' rights, no sick pay, holidays or minimum wage guarantees. But today the UK boss of Deliveroo says his company would be keen on paying benefits to its riders, but it's currently the employment law that's stopping them.
And we're restricted from providing some of the benefits that we would as a business like to provide. That, as we go through the next few months, is hopefully something that the government will consider looking at.
Our undercover journalist had no benefits because, like all other riders, he was a self-employed independent contractor. But in our investigation, we found he had limited freedom of when to work.
You need to do at least 2 out of Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
2 dinners out of those. Other than that, it's up to you how many you want to do.
Well, there is significant flexibility, even in those that work significant hours, 40 to 50 hours in a week. And thus, we do maintain a self-employed model for those individuals, which we think is appropriate. We're going to go down the road with high discussion.
But Dan, there doesn't seem any flexibility at all, except on your side.
The flexibility is...
I mean, you're not paying national insurance. You're not covering them from other costs, which taxpayers will have to actually pick up. I mean, it's a marvellous model if you can get away with it, isn't it?
But it's also a model millions are now depending on for earning a living.
Where does this inquiry go from here, then?
Well, this is all a big concern because it's all relatively new. A few years ago, no one worked like this. Now it's estimated that about 5 million people in the UK have these types of jobs. Now, the government has commissioned a report into how business should keep up with this fast-changing business practices. And the parliamentary report committee that we saw in that report will hear further evidence next month. Now, as I mentioned in my report, we examined the working practices of Deliveroo yesterday. We told you last night that our undercover reporter had been given a £50 bonus that he wasn't expecting after we told the company he was a journalist. It's been pointed out to us that he was always entitled to that £50 and had been told about it in an email when he signed up. So I hope that clears things up.
Rags Martell, thank you. You're watching the ITV News in London. Still to come, plastic not fantastic. Is it time for a bottle tax? And how you can see some of Diana's most famous dresses from one of her most famous moments for yourself. First, it is the biggest night in British music, and this year the Brits is making the headlines for the right reasons. Last year the award show was criticised for overlooking black artists, but they've changed the judging panels and the results are obvious in the nominations. Lucrezia Millerini is on the red carpet at the O2 for us this evening. Lucrezia, a much more positive build-up this year.
Yes, indeed. The Brits have been going now for more than 30 years, something of an institution, really, a bit like the Oscars for the music world here in the UK. But any institution, any organisation has to move with the times. And as you say, yeah, there was a lot of criticism last year for the awards, just not reflecting the kind of music that people were listening to and not being diverse. So there was this shake-up of the voting academy. And I think we found this year the results have been pretty obvious. It is the UK's biggest music awards ceremony, but last year the Brits came under heavy fire. Only one black artist nominated, none performing. There was a backlash on social media, the hashtag #BritsSoWhite trending. Organisers were accused of being out of touch and not representing the music people were actually listening to. So they responded. Hundreds more women and ethnic minority music experts were invited to help pick future nominees and winners. This year's list looks very different. Nominated for Best British Male and Best Album, Michael Kiwanuka sings about being a black man in a white world. Ahead of a gig in Islington last night, he told me that without change, the Brits were in danger of becoming irrelevant.
What was cool about the Brits, I remember when I was growing up, when I was younger, it was really reflecting what was happening. If it was Britpop, you know, Jarvis Cocker and Pulp and Oasis, Blur, you know, but those days that aren't now. So if you don't see or react to what's happening around you in the world, then you're going to become obsolete at some point. And I think the main thing that's interesting, especially this year, is obviously way more diverse, and a lot of music that's been around for a while is now beginning to get recognised.
Tell my man shut up. Shut up. Mention my name in your tweets.
Brit recognition, finally, of the grime scene, with artists like Stormzy, whose lyrics reflected the previous snub.
Couple man call me a backup dancer. On stage at the Brits, I'm a backup dancer.
Now nominated, along with fellow Londoners Kano and Skepta. Last year's Mercury Prize winner tonight, up for 3 awards.
It felt like the grime and underground scene has come up against a lot of walls over the years, and I feel that, you know, with the advent of like Stormzy and Skepta, you can't really deny what they've done impacted the whole music scene, not just grime, not just urban music scene, but pop music in general. And I feel that, you know, it's about time that they've been recognised.
The Lemonade album was just...
So while the Grammys in the US batted away accusations of racism after Beyoncé failed to win for her album Lemonade, it seems the Brits have acknowledged it was time for a change. Yeah, it was time for a change, and they made those changes. Lots of positive reaction here on the red carpet about those changes. I've spoken to a lot of people here tonight, including Craig David. Now, he's back at the Brits 16 years after he was first nominated, and he said, well, diversity, that's what the Brits really should be all about.
Kano's in there. Skepta's in there.
Yeah.
And across the board, Stormzy's were breakthrough actors in there. So grime music, which is very colloquially British, has been recognised. And there's some names that none of us wouldn't know who are in the mix, so it's not just a popularity contest either. So I think this year the balance has been correct.
I've got 3 guys here like up for awards, and I'm just like rooting for all of them. I'm so happy. I feel like time has been served. We have been consistent over years, not just me, but from Dizzy Rascal to Kano to Skepta, so Chipmunk, Dizzy, like just everybody. Sorry, I feel like we've all done our part.
Yeah. You're up against your mate Skepta as well.
Yeah, man, it's all good though, man. I think that's sick. Like the fact that we're in the we're here, like everyone's here. Wiley here, the Godfather who created this, like Skepta, Kano, like legends, like so. I'm just happy to be here amongst that. So yeah.
Well, Stormzy there, he's been nominated for Breakthrough Artist, one of the new faces here at the Brits this year, but some very familiar faces also.
David Bowie. Now, he's been posthumously nominated for 2 Brit Awards. One for Best Album, of course, for his album Dark Star that was released just after his death last year, and also for Best Male. Bookies say that he might actually take one of those, or they might actually be awarded to him. Robbie Williams also, he's going to be returning here. He gets a Lifetime Achievement Award. He's going to be performing here on stage at the O2. And of course, Skepta, he's up for 3 Brit Awards. He's also going to be performing, and Little Birdie told me we can expect a surprise, hopefully, for him on stage. Nina.
Cressida, thank you very much. Enjoy the night. Well, over the years, the Brits have given us plenty to talk about, and I'm sure this year will be no different. You can vote for your favourite moment on our website. Search online for ITV London, where that awful moment where Madonna fell is currently the favourite, followed by a bizarre acceptance speech by Bjork and that infamous stage invasion by Jarvis Cocker. The PIgate affair at Sutton United made it all the way to Parliament today. Sutton's reserve goalkeeper Wayne Shaw left the club after he ate a pasty on the touchline during their FA Cup tie against Arsenal. He had been told a bookmaker had offered odds he would do so during the game, potentially breaching betting rules. Today, the local MP couldn't resist bringing it up at Prime Minister's Questions.
I wonder if my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, will join me in congratulating Sutton for such a spirited performance on Monday. And finally, congratulating and thanking Arsenal for their absolute generosity in allowing Sutton to keep a little bit of an extra slice of the FA Cup pie.
A neat reference to pie, if I may say so, to my honourable friend there at the end.
Time to find out what's coming up after us with Mary.
The children's author killed by her fiancé. A jury finds Ian Stewart guilty of murdering Helen Bailey. Now police say they will re-examine the death of his first wife. The 18-month-old girl murdered by her guardian, who'd become almost invisible to the authorities. And Princess Diana's iconic dresses go on public display at Kensington Palace. Do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Before that, is it time for a tax on plastic bottles? Londoners buy more disposable water bottles than anyone else in England, around 3 a week on average. And they're one of the main forms of litter floating in the Thames. So would the tax reduce our use, as it did with plastic bags? We sent Martin Stew to find out.
It's refreshing, it's natural, and it doesn't have one single calorie.
In 1980, we drank an average of 1 litre of bottled water per person per year.
That's what I drink instead of a cocktail.
Now we drink more than 1 litre of the stuff a day, and only half of the bottles are recycled. The rest end up in landfill or our waterways.
I've been paddling on the Thames for since the 90s. And I've definitely noticed that the problem's worsened, so there's more plastic in the river. It's growing in the canals as well, so yeah, it's a real problem.
Paul Hyman is a paddleboarding instructor and environmental activist. On an average litter pick, he can collect 8 bags of plastic in just 2 hours.
It's about changing people's attitudes to use of plastic. So we're keen to not just clear up, because you can do it forever.
Environmentalists say the problem is getting out of control.
The science around plastic at the moment is that we genuinely don't know what impacts we're going to be having. A plastic bottle, for example, can last in the environment for 400 or 500 years, but that only breaks down into smaller pieces of plastic. Surveys have shown that, that most of the fish in the Thames now have pieces of plastic in them. We're finding that plastic is getting into the flesh of things like mussels, so it's getting into the human food chain.
Following the success of charging for plastic bags, which has seen an 85% decrease in the amount being used, today the Environment Committee at City Hall were discussing what to do about plastic bottles. One option, used in Germany, is to make customers pay a deposit, which is given back when the empty bottle is returned.
And they collect 98% of their plastic bottles for recycling. Here we probably struggle to achieve just over 50% in the UK.
Similar schemes have been successful in cities in Norway, Australia and Canada.
And perhaps the most extreme example is San Francisco, which has become the first city in the world to ban the sale of plastic bottles on city property.
In London, the idea is only just being floated.
So how much stuff have you got there, Paul?
Quite a lot.
But with our waterways filling up and Coca-Cola today saying it was no longer opposed to a deposit scheme, a water bottle tax could one day become a reality.
A bit of rain out there. You've got about 10 seconds to tell me all about what we can expect from Storm Doris.
Well, Storm Doris, so they name storms if you've got an amber warning or worse. Now, the amber warning is to the north of us, so we're going to avoid the worst of the wind, but actually tomorrow morning is going to be pretty foul for all of us.
Right.
Gusts of up to 60 miles an hour and some quite heavy squally showers as well. So it's not going to be particularly pleasant during the rush hour tomorrow morning. So through this evening and overnight, things turning wetter and increasingly windy ahead of that yellow warning in place from tomorrow morning until 8 p.m. tomorrow night. As things turning increasingly stormy, that storm named, of course, Doris, who doesn't sound that threatening, but potentially could be actually gusts of up to 60 miles an hour, particularly around about rush hour. Where exactly is she? Well, here she is, Storm Doris, an area of low pressure, moving across the north of the UK as we go through tomorrow. Rain around rush hour, then clearing away out towards the east. Still pretty strong winds, though, all the way through to the evening, so that warning in place until 8 p.m. tomorrow. Out there this evening and tonight, well, a bit of a wet picture, really. Some light drizzly outbreaks of rain, a fair bit of low cloud for all of us. The main story, though, is that wind picking up, so getting pretty strong. In fact, by 5 in the morning, average wind strength of 30 miles an hour, gusts stronger than that. It's a mild night, but it's going to feel cold if you're in the wind. And then as we go through tomorrow morning, things start to pick up even more. So what we're going to do is just pause the map here and have a look. 9 o'clock, peak rush hour really is when we're going to get the strongest, heaviest showers and the strongest gusts of wind. So up to 60 miles an hour in places, causing potentially some travel disruption. All in all, a very unpleasant morning to be travelling to work or wherever you're going. As the day goes on, though, things turning dry for all of us. 1 or 2 bright breaks, but always staying very windy, so still average strengths up at 30 miles an hour, meaning the temperatures are pretty irrelevant. Then we look further ahead. It gets a bit cooler, but more settled and bright on Friday before a cloudier and damper weekend. Goodbye.
Finally tonight, who could forget? Princess Diana dancing with John Travolta and probably what she wore. Well, the dark silk velvet evening gown is one of a collection of dresses that are now on display at her former home, Kensington Palace. Some have been shipped over from New York and Chile, the exhibition hoping to capture how she went from a shy teenager to a supremely confident working woman. Carolyn Sim went to take a look.
As you walk around these glass cases, every dress brings back vivid memories of a glamorous young woman who became a princess in the 1980s. There's her famous dance with John Travolta at the White House, where she stole the limelight in luxurious velvet. The time when she was seen carrying a baby Prince Harry in this tartan green. And the numerous state occasions where she dazzled the crowds, yet remained very human. The exhibition at Kensington Palace, Diana's home for 15 years, features 26 of her most iconic dresses.
She had to learn very quickly, and although she never liked to be known as a clothes horse, she learned very quickly to use fashion to help her do the job at hand, whether as patron of the arts, humanitarian, or as a working princess.
The dresses, brought here from around the world, show how she liked to experiment and break the rules. Her demure, romantic side changed through the years, and she began to communicate through her clothes.
In the 90s, she was praised for her non-dowdy, more modern style of royal dress. They're bold, they're more sexy, and they reflect her more confident personality.
Together with designer Catherine Walker, Diana created a working wardrobe. They called it her royal uniform. She wore this red suit in 1996 at the London Lighthouse's new HIV/AIDS charity appeal. It's been 20 years since Diana died in the car crash in Paris, but the fascination with her lives on. The mystique of a princess with the determination to fight for what she believed in. Carolyn Sim, ITV News.
Diana was, of course, the world's most photographed woman, and you can see plenty more pictures of those famous dresses by going to our Facebook page. But that is all from us for now. Mary is standing by with the ITV Evening News. From all of us on the London team, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.